Welcome to the Irish NFL show. It's our preview and picks for week 16, and we have a full slate of games because the NFL, as you know, likes to give out plenty of gifts at Christmas. So we got games on Saturday, Thursday indeed, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Technically, Stephen say if you count the Monday night football game, which on this side of the Atlantic, of course, takes place in the early hours of Stephen's Day morning. It all gets underway with Thursday night football. The Saints, despite a convincing win against Tommy Cutlets and the Giants, sorry about that, Brian, in their last game, they're four
Thanks for
point
that.
underdogs on the road as they visit SoFi to take on the Rams in Thursday night football.
Yeah, and for those who haven't checked it out, we captured the Thursday night game in a special podcast with Mike Carson, who people would recognize from his time covering the NFL on BBC Channel 4 and obviously more lately on the Nat Coombs show. It was a really enjoyable podcast. But yeah, we get into that game and just reflecting on the odds you touched on it there, Connor, with QuinBet.com. -4, Rams home favourites, both teams 7-7. It's probably one of the more intriguing games we've had on the Thursday night throughout the course of the season. Both teams have to win for various reasons. Saints looking to win to capture the NFC South. Obviously, the Rams are a hot team looking for a playoff. But yeah, it's one, and the odds are very reflective of where both sides are. I guess whilst the Saints have picked up some wins, I think by and large most people would look at this as a game potentially that the Rams will win. I certainly have picked them on that particular podcast. I think they'll cover that -4 that's available. And I think they're around 1-2 on QuinBet. So yeah, a good game to kick off week 16 on Thursday night.
Yeah, very good. And as you say, look, there's a lot of games that are do or die this weekend, given the playoff implications. And our first segment of games is brought to you by RuPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. You can see what RuPoint can do for your business at rupoint.com. Well, the games, as we say, Colin, get underway on Saturday night. The Bengals are at the Steelers. Mason Rudolph, with your throw so bright, won't you guide the Steelers tonight? Will he guide them to a victory, do you think?
No. This is, I mean, in a season of desperation moves, Connor, this is another one of them. And it's surprising because the Steelers are a team, so associated with stability. But ultimately, they made decisions not to move on from Matt Canada. And not to modernize the offense in the offseason, and they're paying for it now. They've actually somehow regressed unbelievably since they fired Canada. They've now on yet another quarterback. We've seen Mason Rudolph. Like, I mean, unless this is somebody else, and they've snuck Philip Rivers in a disguise for Christmas. Like, what is it about Mason Rudolph that leads anyone to believe that he's a better option than Mitchell Trubisky? I mean, Trubisky has plenty of issues. We all know the issues, but ultimately you're changing for change's sake. And you're hoping against hope that Mike Tomlin magic is going to get you away with it. Can the Steelers win? Sure, it's the NFL. Things can happen. It's Mike Tomlin. It's a divisional game, but it won't be their offense that does it. I mean, again, we saw it this week. TJ Watt coming out, talking about players not putting the effort in training. And all of a sudden, oh, look, there's the George Pickens just jogging through training. A guy who gave one of the...
Well, Colin, you see, you don't get that because you're a media guy. That's George Pickens' excuse. Oh, no, it wasn't that I wasn't blocking. You don't get it because you don't play football.
He was worried about being the next Tank Dell. I mean, just ridiculous type of stuff. It's so un-Pittsburgh-esque what we are seeing this season with Johnson, with Pickens, because Antonio Brown was there for years and they kept the madness under wraps. Other than kicking a punter in the face, they, for the most part, Tomlin kept it under wraps, but it's all beginning to spiral. It's difficult for me to see them winning it. And I do think they're going to have to make serious changes because it's not a modern offense that they're playing there. Look, the defense will play hard, but ultimately, I think that Jake Browning and the Bengals are going to get the win and keep that show on the road.
I would tend to agree with that assessment. I have to say, Colin, I'm a big admirer of the Bengals culture. As you know, I think they've played hard all this season despite their obvious issues and the loss of Burrow, and Burrow at half power for the first few games. They only really had a small window where everything looked like it was heading in the right direction, but somehow they managed to pull out wins. They get victories. They've gotten the best out of Jake Browning, who was well fired up at the weekend. Striking contrast between the effort that you get out of George Pickens and what you get out of T. Higgins, who pulls off a Reed Richards style stretch, miraculous touchdown to get them to overtime, and then they win it with a kick from Money McPherson. Now, I don't think, despite the fact that this is at home, which might give you pause to think that it could be one of those unlikely Steelers wins, so many of which we've seen this season, I think it's going to be Cincinnati. Brian, what do you reckon?
It's funny Colin mentioned Philip Rivers in this instance, when he's talking about Mason Rudolph, because I remember 2021 during the COVID year, in which Mason Rudolph was drafted in to replace Big Ben, who went down with COVID, on a Sunday night football game against the Chargers, and nobody gave them an absolute hope of winning that game. And lo and behold, Mason pulled off a masterful performance on Sunday Night Football to defy the odds, and maybe that's what we're going to get in this game. And they did win in Cincinnati recently, when I suppose it was Jake Brown's fourth proper start. But I can't buy into it, because what we've seen from the Bengals, and in particular their coaching staff, that they've navigated the way to produce this offense, with Burrow gone. And obviously we spoke about all the various different players they have available. Ja'Marr Chase, one thing that concerns me is Chase may or may not play. He's 50-50 by all accounts. He's been injured. He didn't really do much last weekend. So they are struggling, with injuries, but it's hard to see past them in terms of the momentum they've got. They're in the playoff race. And I agree with you. I think it's a Bengals win. You see last week where we spoke so highly of the Steelers' defense at times, gave up 30 unanswered points against the Colts, and that kind of says a lot for where probably the defensive players' heads are at. And also we have to bear in mind that, Kamikaze, as me and Colin were calling them on Monday's show, is gone for the season, in terms of being ruled out because of the suspensions. That's another ill effect to the defense. So no, Bengals for me to win this game Saturday night.
Next game up is Bills at Chargers. For me, the Bills now are pulling on that mantle of the team that, quote unquote, no one wants to face heading into the playoffs. Suddenly found their mojo. Win against the Chiefs, which is one thing, but what they did to the Cowboys over the weekend was entirely different. A pretty intimidating display. Dallas leaving Orchard Park shook after being literally run over. I mean, you have a game where Josh Allen passes for less than 100 yards. 94 yards is all they had to put up passing. They just rolled over the Cowboys, just punched them and punched them again and again. It was one of those Simpsons, stop hitting him, he's dead already type games, which has really sent the Cowboys homeward to think again, to coin that phrase from Flower of Scotland, and the Bills in a very different direction. They've put themselves behind the 8-ball a little bit, but they're looking like they've finally found, and what a difference 2 weeks make, when we were talking about Sean McDermott and those ill-judged 9/11 comments resurfacing, and we were talking about whether getting rid of Ken Dorsey was the right thing to do, when we were talking about the injuries and the loss of Matt Milano and others through the season and what that was going to do, and we were talking about the Buffalo defense not stepping up and doing what it was supposed to do. Well, you had a pretty good example against literally the most high-powered offense in the NFL, or it was prior to that game, of what the Bills can do. And we've kind of been waiting all season for them to show up and show this kind of form. I guess against the Chargers, you have a pretty good chance to show that wasn't just a one-off. You couldn't be getting the Chargers at a better time, you would think, after that demolition job in Las Vegas. On one hand, you might say, well, they've got to bounce back. They've got to show something. The post-Staley era begins, and maybe you get a bit of a bounce. I don't think the Bills are the team you want to be welcoming into your stadium right now, if that is what is on your agenda. I think this team looks like it's turning the corner and rounding into form at just the right time. There's a reason they're 11.5 points favourites. I think you'd be very, very brave to go against that. It's Bills all the way for me. What do you think, lads?
Glad this is on the shortened version of the previews. Absolutely 100% Buffalo Bills all the way.
Mr. Berg sang about a spaceman coming traveling. Josh Allen is that spaceman. Bills Mafia are winning this.
Good stuff, right? Browns at Texans next up. Brian, no CJ Stroud again for the Texans. It looks like Browns coming off that morale-boosting last-minute win against the Bears. They have the Joe Flacco thing, which has its ups and downs. As Colin says, he throws beautiful interceptions. He also throws some beautiful passes when he needs to. And he threw for over 200 yards in the fourth quarter last weekend. He seems like a guy who's getting hot, and you ride the hot hand.
Yeah, and two very similar wins in many ways for both sides last weekend. Bearing in mind that the Texans were down 13-0 and looked to be, I suppose, looked to what a lot of people felt which was going to be a Titans victory, and they rallied and came back. And then obviously, as you touched on there, similar traits and with the Browns come back, and obviously the momentum builds. And like the Texans really needed that last week. We thought they were kind of starting to slip and the wheels were coming off. I'd be more confident on the Browns, having watched both games over the course of the last week in terms of watching bit more detailed highlights. I mean, I felt that the Titans never really, despite the lead and the pick six, and Derrick Henry struggled. Like for me, a better team last Sunday would have won that game against the Texans. Where with the Browns, for me, they're going in the right direction. And with the permutations that are in our hands at the moment, like there's a real push that potentially they could be the fifth seed and that wild card team, which is a dangerous team for me going into the playoffs, even if it is Joe Flacco. So now I'm going to go with the road team here. I think it's not the most daunting of places to go as a road game at this time of the season. I think it's a Browns win for me.
Colin, this is probably one of the more intriguing games of the weekend. It's a really interesting fixture for a whole host of reasons, as Brian was starting to outline there. The Texans showed that they're not just CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. They really pulled it out of the flames last weekend. I guess a big kudos to D'Amico Ryans on this one. Would you go against Brian? Do you think the Texans can take it at home, or is it going to be a Cleveland victory?
I do think this will be one of the tighter games of the weekend, and there are any number of covers of Santa Claus is coming to town. Well, there'll be plenty of fans out to see Joe Flacco coming to town, and yeah, it'll be all on show, Connor. Whenever he steps back, there is the possibility of a touchdown. There's the possibility of an interception. There's the possibility of the most baffling play you have ever seen in your life. They'll all be on show, but these are two teams that are both beaten up, and they have, I suppose, each kind of lost really key components over the course of the season. I am going to disagree with Brian, though, because the Bears could and should have beaten the Browns last weekend. The Texans, to me, are a better team than the Bears, and they're better coached than the Bears. And I think in the battle of the former Broncos quarterbacks, Case Keenum's just chuck it up, and somebody's down there somewhere will see them through.
Sorry, Connor, quick one. Colin, would you not refer to him as what John Elway referred to him as when he introduced him at that Broncos presser? What was that?
Case Keesum. And let's not forget that when he introduced Joe Flacco, he said Joe Flacco was entering the prime of his career.
I'm going to agree with half of what you said, Colin. I think the Texans are definitely a better coached team than the Bears. I think at full strength, they're a better team than the Bears. I don't necessarily think they're in a better position to handle the Browns than the Bears were last weekend. That the Bears defensively put up a much better effort than you're going to see from Houston, even playing at home. Pretty much shut down that Cleveland running game, which has been one of their strengths this season. That's not going to happen. So it's not going to be as much up to Flacco, in my view, as it was over the weekend to pull it out. And I think defense travels well. Cleveland is one of the best in the business. I think they'll have enough to emerge from Houston with a win. So it's a Cleveland victory for me. Colin, back to you for Lions at Vikings. Another very interesting divisional game here. Two teams that Vikings coming off that overtime loss to the Bengals. Lions have wobbled lately, but managed to right the ship, unfortunately, against your Broncos. Sorry for your loss in their last game out. How do you see this one going?
Well, the Beach Boys sang all about Santa's beard. This is about Dan Campbell's beard, because they righted the ship against the Broncos. They didn't just beat the Broncos, they kicked the Broncos' ass on both sides of the ball. They were really impressive. They have got the O-line back, which I think is a key component for this Lions team. I do think it will be tough against a Vikings team who are, to me, one of the best coached in the entire league, Connor. And I think I could make an argument absolutely for the Vikings winning it, because Brian Flores is going to have Jared Goff in hell, right? We talked at length last week about the fact that Goff is a different QB when he is under pressure. The Broncos couldn't do that. I do think the Vikings will be more successful in that, but I think with the line back, with how the Lions got their mojo back last week, I do think they can go in to Minnesota and get the win. So I'm going to say that Dan Campbell's men keep it running, keep it rolling, but I do think this could be a tight divisional battle.
Yeah, I agree. I think I can very much see the Vikings hanging tough in this one, and it being very difficult for Detroit for all the reasons you've mentioned. I don't think this is going to be one that Jared Goff is going to enjoy. You know, what Flores has done, you know, it's one of those things that people are going to be writing theses about from an NFL perspective. You know, it's one of those, like, we've seen innovations in defense in the past. You know, Flores is going either cover 0 or he's going drop 8. You look at the charts, what they do compared to what other defenses do, and they're at the most extreme end it can possibly be. People would have called that desperation in less experienced and less skillful hands than Flores. What it is actually it's both innovation and it's creatively using the talent at your disposal, and the way they're able to disguise what they're doing will confuse even the more seasoned quarterbacks. And it's certainly something that you can imagine will have Jared Goff seeing ghosts out there. I do, however, think that the Lions are just simply a better team. I think that the Vikings' struggles on offense really make it difficult for them to capitalize on what they're able to do on the other side of the ball. I think that continues even at home. I think it's a Detroit win. Brian?
My concern for the Lions is more the outside noise, because it's this weekend it's monumental for them in a sense. They haven't been in the playoffs for 7 years, since 2016, and they haven't won the division title for 30 years. So to go on the road and win the division after a 30-year wait, you imagine the enormity of how much it's going to mean to the fans, and to win it in, you know, on the road in a divisional rival as well. It gives me thought for pause around how Goff, and Goff's been around the corner, but he hasn't played great last weekend. He had of late, but he had a great game last weekend. But ultimately, over the course of the season, his numbers are off the charts. He's nearly hitting 4,000 passing yards, and now on the running game is nearly over 1,000 now at this stage. And I didn't see enough out of Bengals, despite the 2 touchdown lead last weekend. I didn't see enough out of quarterback in Mullins, and I always felt he was a guy that would, you know, there was a reason why they didn't go here in the first place, and they went and got Joshua Dobbs. I don't think he's the answer, and I think by the time the fourth quarter comes, it'll be the Lions fans celebrating. So I'm with you guys, which then generally means we're going to give them the axe, and it'll be a Vikings victory. But no, I'll stick with you as all three of us on the Lions.
Colin, Packers visit the Panthers at the weekend. The games against the NFC South haven't been brilliant for Green Bay. They're coming off a loss to Tampa Bay. They also dropped one to the Falcons earlier this season. They did manage a late comeback against the Saints, but the Panthers are coming off a win themselves. What do you reckon?
They are, but they're coming off a win gifted to them by the Falcons. I mean, you look back at that, and it is quite incredible. And we'll get to the Falcons later on. But for the Packers, the Weather Girls sang "Dear Santa, bring me a man this Christmas." Well, the Packers are singing "Dear Santa, bring me a defensive coordinator this Christmas." It has been a disaster at the defensive coordinator position for the Packers. They have talent there, but they haven't put it together. They look all at sea at times. I think that the offense has come on in leaps and bounds. It was the defense that was supposed to carry this young offense. They have not held up their side of the bargain. I think Matt LaFleur is doing his best to probably, be loyal, keep him there. You don't want to be making changes, but it's hilarious to see, say, the Eagles making changes, the Steelers making changes, and the Packers, where this has been an ongoing issue for, years at this point, and they have a lot of talent, Connor, on the defensive side of the ball. They, I think, are fortunate here that they are going up against a Panthers team who got the win based on field goals last year. Field goals are not going to be enough this week against a Packers team who can score points, and I have the Packers winning this and getting back on track.
I'm going to go with Green Bay as well for 2 reasons. Firstly, because I think they're going to win. Secondly, because I want them to win the next 2 games so that the Bears can deny them a playoff place by beating them at Lambeau in the last week of the season. I'm nothing if not bitter and optimistic at the same time, Brian.
I've been champing at the bit for the Panthers to get that second win. They finally got it. That's it for the rest of the season. Packers.
Very good. That brings us to the end of our first segment of picks, brought to you by RuPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. See how RuPoint can help your business at rupoint.com. Right, we continue with the early evening slate on Sunday as the Colts visit the Falcons. That's a win that's badly needed by both sides. Brian, we talked about the Falcons, or touched on them briefly in the context of that awful one they dropped to Carolina at the weekend. The Colts continue to be probably one of the darlings for neutrals this season, a team's ascent, despite the loss of their putative franchise quarterback and Anthony Richardson. And it's been an exciting ride for them, and probably put Shane Steichen, to be fair, in the conversation for Coach of the Year.
Absolutely, bearing in mind he's done it for large parts of the season. He's just on there with a backup quarterback. This strikes me as a tale of two teams with quarterback issues, in the sense of where they've had to kind of deal with these things over the course of the season. Anthony Richardson was gone very early with a number of concussions, and Gardner Minshew came in, and there was ups and downs with him, peaks and troughs, and we see that with him throughout the course of his career. But the one thing the Colts have recognized is he is the best guy to give us an opportunity to win these games, whether we like the way, the dynamic of how he plays the game offensively. Like he'll take risks, he'll take gamble, he'll put his head in when he goes on a particular run. He's quite good on the getting out on the perimeter in terms of the run pass option. He's gone in for a number of touchdowns, and there's been struggles. We saw, despite winning in Germany, how poor he was. He couldn't really move the ball whatsoever. And there's been games like that, even the game a couple of weeks ago with the Titans. And then you look at the other side of the coin. The Falcons can't make up their own minds where they're at with a quarterback, because we saw early on in the season they were winning, but Ritter wasn't playing great, and Arthur Smith was defending him. He was challenging him, pushing back on the media, saying, "You're not seeing what I'm saying." Then he has a really, he probably played poor in other games, and that was the game that he finally moved away from. Then he brings him back, and now he's gone back to Taylor Heinicke. They're one game out of winning the division, and this, for me, this chopping and changing makes no sense. You just have to run. You have to run the table with Ritter, whether you like it or not. That's from my personal opinion. They've put themselves in the position. They just have to see it out now. But obviously not the case. They're gone back. I'm going to go with the Colts. I'm rambling on here. The reality is, right now, the Colts are a much better team. They're functioning better. The team know what they're getting from Minshew. They know what they're getting from the coach. I don't believe the Falcons players know what they're getting from the quarterback, from the head coach. It's too much chopping and changing. They are at home, but I believe the Colts will go in there and keep their dream alive of being in the playoffs come January.
Yeah, Falcons owner Arthur Blank didn't exactly sound resounding or robust in his defense of Arthur Smith when he was asked the obvious question this week. I think pretty much everybody feels the same way on that one. It's going to be taxi for Arthur Smith, that is, not Blank, at the end of the season. These two teams look like they're moving in very different directions. It's Colts as well for me. Colin?
George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley as the dynamic duo of Wham sang Last Christmas, and it is the last Christmas for Arthur Smith in Atlanta. I mean, Connor, we talked about it on Monday night's show. Arthur Blank had come into the press conference. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't want to talk to the media afterwards because he had many thoughts. Well, he outlined those thoughts on Tuesday in an interview. Reading between the lines, it's only going one way. It's a shame, because I really think there is fantastic talent in this Falcons team, but they have regressed. They've lost their identity, as Brian was outlining. This is a team that were fantastic at rushing the ball last year. They added weapons, and yet they have regressed. You look at it, Bijan is not playing well, but he's actually gotten worse as the season has gone on. Kyle Pitts has gotten worse the more time he spent there. He was setting records in his rookie season. He's gotten worse as time has gone on. I mean, this is the antithesis of King Midas that we are witnessing before our eyes. I think Shane Steichen, by contrast, given what's going on with the Eagles and how poor they look in terms of moving the ball, he looks like actual King Midas. I'm going to say that the Colts can keep it running, and I would wholeheartedly concur with what you said earlier regarding Shane Steichen should be in the Coach of the Year conversation.
All right, Seahawks and Titans is next up. One that I find quite difficult to pick, I'm not alone in that. The bookies have this as a 3-point game. I think Seattle are 3-point favorites with Quinn Bet. you can look at both of these teams over the last couple of weeks as a sample and say Titans went and beat Miami and beat them up, really physically intimidated them, did everything that you'd expect a Mike Vrabel team to do, and put the doubt in Miami's minds that they obviously got their get-right game against the Jets. We'll talk about both of those teams over the next couple of games. Seahawks, I thought, looked quite good against Dallas, probably put up the best performance that we've seen any team manage in Arlington so far this season. They were on the back of a 4-game skid, and including that one, which they dropped despite the fact that it was tight. Then went and beat the Eagles quite well, as it turned out over the weekend. Surprise for some people, but it's put the Eagles in a difficult situation. But that Seattle defense is suspect, and you're not getting behind them with a huge degree of confidence on the road. Tennessee, on the other hand, coming off that loss, despite rolling in with the Houston Oilers jerseys and trolling the Texans, didn't work out well for them. D'Amico Ryans really outcoached Mike Vrabel. You had the Will Levis injury as well. What have they got to play for really at this stage? You know, Seahawks still very much in the hunt for the playoffs. They're going to need to pick this one up. And I think that's probably ultimately what's going to carry it, that Pete Carroll is such a competitor. The Seahawks have probably looked slightly less than the sum of their parts and been quite disappointing. You know, they got a bit of a gem from Drew Lock, and it's the QB issue, I suppose, is one of the more interesting talking points in the run-up to this game, Brian.
Yeah, I agree. I'm torn on this one. And I'm actually going to lean with the home side. And it might come as a surprise that I'm going against the Seahawks, and you could argue they'll have all the momentum going into this game. But for 3.5 quarters last week, the Eagles ran the ball down the Seahawks' throat, and that's been happening quite a lot over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks during this slide. The Cowboys did it to them. And you could argue that these teams are really effective run games, so it doesn't come as a surprise. And the Eagles got away from it a bit towards the end, and they had opportunity. They went deep on a number of throws, which just didn't make sense. They were trying to do the killer play to get the game over and done with. And time and time again, Derrick Henry, when he comes off a really bad game, tends to have a re-emergence the following week. And I mean, you can't come back off any poorer game than 16 yards rushing and little in receptions. It was a dire performance from him last weekend. But I am going to go with the Titans. I think Will Levis, we saw a huge game from him the week before, so maybe it was inevitably to have a bit of a come down off that game. But I still think there's bright spots from him, and I think in this game, if it's again, I think ultimately it's going to come down to as well who's playing quarterback. As Colin rightly called it, was Drew Lock might have had a great drive. Where was he for the other 3 quarters? And where, you know, he has these boneheaded plays in him. And on the road, I think it's one way. If he does play, I think the Titans will find a way to get to him. And for me, it's a Titans victory in a surprise.
Colin?
Well, just want to, like, good for Drew Lock the other night, right? He got it, but he got all the laurels in the world, and he did the post-game interview on the field, and everyone you know, kind of loved it. And it was like, oh, he didn't get a fair shot in Denver, and why didn't Vic Fangio like him? Well, this is why Vic Fangio didn't like him, just to highlight, right? Because the COVID game that people may remember, and the Broncos story when it initially came out was the quarterbacks had done nothing wrong. They were being hard done by. Well, there you go. The league denied those reports because surveillance video from Denver's facility showed the quarterbacks had tried to fool the system. They removed their contract tracing devices and put them in the 4 corners of the meeting room and then sat together to watch film. They lied about it, okay? They lied about it. It was, once again, the cover-up was worse than the crime. That's why Denver had to play that game. That's why Vic Fangio had no time for Drew Lock. That's what happened in Denver. Now, if Drew owned that and admitted it, cool, I'd be good to move on. We could all forget it. Instead, no, he denied it. He had his mom lie about it. Anyway, he now is in Seattle. He's with Pete. Pete and him have some interesting history, but Kate Bush sang December will be magic again, and I believe that will be the case for Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. I think that things are, despite the fact that Will Levis appears to be some sort of crash test dummy, Connor, and he puts his body in different ways of harm and different levels of violence every single week. I don't think the Titans will have enough. I think, unfortunately, it is the law of diminishing returns for the Titans right now. I think the Seahawks had issues again the other night, but they were playing against a good Eagles team. They found a way to get it done. And I think no matter who the QB is, they will win this one. And I have them possibly sneaking back into the playoffs.
All right, Brian, Commanders at Jets is next up. The Jets shut out last weekend, well beaten by the Dolphins, and surprise, surprise, that brought the curtain down on any chance that we might have of seeing Aaron Rodgers before the end of the season. As unlikely as that looked, and as likely as he made it sound in his regular Pat McAfee appearances, that seems no longer to be something that's likely to happen this season. So it's a lost year for the Jets, officially eliminated from the playoffs, of course, by this stage, and something of a dead rubber here. What do you reckon?
I think the storylines for this game are more so, again, what's happening outside of off the field or in the head office, because Aaron Rodgers was on McAfee yesterday, and I'm probably getting away from the game. There's not a lot to say about this game in all due respect. Both sides are obviously going in the wrong direction. So I think it's only relevant that we speak about what Aaron Rodgers said yesterday, because he said he's coming back, but not just coming back for 1 year. He said about playing for 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4 years. That's the way he feels right now. And then he also went on to say, I will be very much involved in the player organization in terms of who we're going to look to recruit during the off season. And then the final caveat was, if they want me to be involved. I mean, this guy is essentially like, he is pulling these guys left, right, and center in the Jets organization, and it's just an absolute farce, in my opinion. The guy has literally been controlling the dynamic of that organization since the minute he went in there, to the minute he did Hard Knocks, to the minute he got the injury. We touched on it on Monday, his level of disgust on the sideline, which continuously was shown last weekend, because he realized he's not going to play this season, and he had this dream of coming back and showing everybody and proving everybody wrong that he could come back from this injury. And then he backtracks yesterday on McAfee and says, I'm not really there yet. And yet today they've activated him. It's all, someone explain to me, because I'm completely lost. Zach Wilson doesn't even look like he's going to play, because he's obviously in the concussion protocol. Boyle is on the street. So Italy, Trevor Siemian, who, as Colin rightly called it a few weeks ago, shouldn't really be in the league anymore. I think the Jets will somehow win, because I think defensively they'll do enough. The defense has been one of the better spots for them throughout the course of the season. And I saw the Commanders for 3 quarters last week do nothing against a really strong Ram defense. So it's the Jets for me. But the only thing the Jets are doing on Sunday is probably damaging their opportunity to be picking in the top 5 of the draft.
I'm going to go Commanders here. I don't really spend any more time than is absolutely strictly necessary on this game, Colin.
I think I find this, honestly, this is an absolute coin flip of a game. And despite all the nonsense with the Jets, and I think Brian, has covered some of it, but I honestly think you could do a whole episode on the dysfunction. I think the Commanders are on the beach. I think they're absolutely in Cabo, and I am going to say that the Jets and the MetLife turf, we talk a lot about player safety, but the MetLife turf claims another few victims, and the Jets get a victory.
Right into the 9 o'clock window, we have Jags at Bucks first up. Brian, Bucks, the Baker Mayfield Indian summer, I don't know what we call it, late honeymoon, but it continues. 4 touchdowns last week, put up some big numbers to down the Packers. The Jags, meanwhile, was all looking so good. You were actually talking about them as potentially the number 1 seed in the AFC just a few short weeks ago. Now it looks like they might be in the category of, there's always one team that looks gassed and stumbles and misses out in the playoffs. We saw Packers happen to the Packers last year. We've seen it happen to the Raiders, Chargers in previous seasons. The Jags need to kind of get out of that funk very, very quickly.
So the polar opposite to where they were this time last year, where they went on the run late on to essentially win the division, go into the playoffs, and they were obviously looking like they were one and done until they had that fantastic second half recovery. But also things have not gone right for them. Colin Wright called after their defense was a lot better on Sunday night than we probably give it credit for. But like how many fumbles, how many missed opportunities, field goals missed, bad play calling at times, bad timing, clock management by Doug Peterson.
Outrageously bad. Just one of the worst segments you're going to see, where they end up not being able to get a playoff when they should have had a guaranteed 3 points, if not a shot at the end zone. It's one of the worst I've seen.
Yeah, and like people say, look, it's only a field goal. It's not so much about that, because they're in a tight game. There's momentum to be taken by going in before halftime. And he did it a few weeks ago on the road, and they got away with it. They won that game in Houston. I don't recall, there was an interception. He went down the sideline and he went out bounds at the 2-yard line. and he went for the play as opposed to taking the field goal. But look, anyway, that's Doug Peterson is a head coach that takes chances. Sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't. Where on the other side, I would say the head coach there, who going into the season was under a lot of pressure, but I think he's proven himself this year. I remember when his first year with the Jets, he had a 10-6 record. The second year, he was very poor, and they dismissed him immediately. And he's been waiting for so long to get his opportunity. And last year, things, probably the situation around Brady and the reality that he was going to walk away that year was probably too much for the team, and they never really performed. Obviously, they won a poor division. But the Bucs right now are going in the right direction. And it's not so much Baker Mayfield. Yeah, he's getting all the credit, but Mike Evans is having a fantastic season. And Colin said it's a service to the player, and the service is given to that team that they haven't signed them and put him on a new contract yet. And one of the leading nights, and I remember calling out last year when we were doing kind of players to look out for coming out of the rookie class, and that was Rashid White, the running back. He's had a fantastic season. He's dynamic both in the rushing game and in receptions. He's, for me, on Sunday, this is a Bucs win. Like, this Bucs team right now they have the opportunity to go and win this division. And I think Jags are going to struggle again. And there's obviously the conversation with whether Trevor Lawrence will clear protocol. Doug Peterson said today, look, he's trending in the right direction, but they're not playing well. So again, it's a home victory for me, Bucs to win this game.
They're not playing well, Colin. Trevor Lawrence isn't playing particularly well. Is there a way it turns around this weekend?
Well, I think the Pistol Annie sang, if we can just make it through December, that would be what Doug Peterson, I think, would also be singing. But it's not looking good to me, Connor. I think Trevor Lawrence is playing hurt. I don't think he was playing particularly well this season. I think, understandably, over the course of the past couple of years, because his rookie season was a complete mess with Urban Meyer, and then obviously Doug comes in. But I think many others you were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time. And I think rightfully so. But I think things have changed now, right? They need him to step up, but unfortunately he is injured. And the defense, as I said on Monday, I do think it played a bit better than maybe I expected. But ultimately, Josh Allen hasn't been as effective in recent weeks. And I think that the Jags need this more, but I just think that the Bucs are, they have more, they know what they're about more at this point in time, which is saying something. Now, Baker Mayfield could go out there and lay an egg after his performance last week. We have seen him do that before, but I'm going to say that unfortunately for Stevie, the Irish Jaguar fan, and plenty of other fans on this side of the Atlantic, a growing fan base, and JP Acosta, who's been on the show, and others, I think the Bucs are going to win this, and the Jags slide continues.
Yeah, I agree, Colin. I think everybody's been waiting for the kind of Baker egg to be laid and for him to turn into the bad Baker. But people tend to forget, when there was good Baker, that famous year in Cleveland when they went to the playoffs and he won a playoff game, playing for the Cleveland Browns, and was very much the man who carried them. No, he can put it together. He can put a sequence of games together. He's done that this season. Brian, you called out some of the weapons that have been at his disposal. Mike Evans is not the only one. Godwin had a great game of the weekend, as you rightly called out. Rashad White has been very good. Defensively, they've still got a mean pass rush when they put their mind to it. They got some of the best, including Winfield, some of the best players in the secondary in the league. They're a sneaky good team, the Bucs. When it clicks, they're a match for most teams, and I thought they kind of showed up the Packers last weekend. I don't think the Jags are in great shape, and I think it's going to be Tampa Bay. Our next game up is Cardinals at Bears. Bears, of course, coming off that tough 3-point loss to Cleveland last weekend. Defensively, they've been playing pretty well, though, over the past couple of weeks. Only San Francisco, believe it or not, has more takeaways than the Bears this season, a unit that wasn't generating turnovers really since the acquisition of Montez Sweat in that trade with the Commanders has been completely transformed. And it's a more classically Chicago Bears defense-first team that we're seeing this season, or over the second half of this season. The offense, though, sputtered against both Cleveland and Minnesota in the past couple of weeks. I'll give you take the sample of the last 4 games, though. The Bears have played 4 teams with playoff aspirations. They played the Vikings, they played the Lions twice, they played the Browns. They've gone 2-2 in those games. The 2 games they've lost, they've been leading by double digits in the fourth quarter, which tells you a lot about the Bears' failings as well as their successes, I'll grant you. But I think they're in decent form at the moment. I think this is not a game that, frankly, I think the Cardinals are necessarily ready for. I don't think that they've got enough to take the Bears at Soldier Field. I think this is one of the games, if you're looking at the remaining schedule for Chicago, that they've got to have, that Eberflus's coach certainly has got to have his card maybe punched already. I fear for his sake, although I don't necessarily fear for Chicago's sake if that is to happen. I think Cardinals coming off, having beaten the Steelers 2 weeks ago, took a comprehensive defeat or 16-point defeat at San Francisco over the weekend. I don't think there's any disgrace in that, though. Having said that, given the way the 49ers have played, and I thought the Cardinals gave them plenty of it at times, which is kind of pretty much what they've been doing all this season. They've been pretty spicy and they've been hanging in and hanging around. I don't think the Bears are going to romp away with this one, but I do think it's going to be a Chicago victory at Soldier Field. What do you think, lads?
Bears to win in a high-scoring game. I think both defenses will be exposed on Sunday. I think this one could go down late to the fourth quarter. I think both teams will have success, but ultimately, I think the Bears win.
Yeah, I'm going to go Bears as well on this one. I'm not sure it'll be high scoring, but I think the Bears will have enough.
I think that is the first time in week 16 that all three of us have gone for the Bears in any given week. May God have mercy on their mortal souls. Right, that brings us to the end of our second segment of games. Right, we move into our third and final segment of week 16 previews and picks. Really tasty one coming up here, Brian. Cowboys at Dolphins. Both teams, Sorry, I dropped out for a second there. I think both Cowboys and Dolphins very, very similar in a lot of respects, in that they've both been able to beat up on the bottom feeders in the league, and yet they've both been very badly exposed, literally by the same team, by Buffalo in the case of both the Cowboys and the Dolphins. Of course, we saw the Cowboys get comprehensively stomped by the 49ers as well. Although we thought that they'd shown us something with the victory over the Eagles, that may have proven to be fool's gold. Likewise with the Dolphins. Yeah, great bounce back win against the Jets, but that followed a really, really embarrassing loss to the Texans the previous week. You just don't really know what you're going to get from both of these teams, which adds a lot of intrigue to this particular battle.
Yeah, and I kind of look at Miami's offense with so many similarities to the Buffalo offense. I mean, they can go toe for toe. Like we saw it last year in 2 games, and ultimately came out the wrong side of both games, and even this season, obviously for the first half, they went score for score, but obviously the Bills at that particular time of the season were playing some great football. Obviously, they're playing fantastic football now. But what worries me with the Cowboys' defense is they're a high-risk, high-reward type of defense, and they go after quarterbacks, and we've seen them, with the very simple pick six this year, and obviously Diggs was injured and Bland has stepped in. And I think the Dolphins could have a similar type of game to what we saw from the Bills last week, that they'll put this Cowboys defense behind the 8 ball. And the Dolphins defense, like I know they obviously had the meltdown 2 weeks ago against the Titans, but by and large over the course of the season, this Dolphins defense had their own success in going after quarterbacks. They've had their own success in terms of pick sixes on quarterback. I think they went 3 weeks in a row pick sixes, so they can deliver as well. And I think it's going to be another tough day for the Cowboys. I think this Dolphins team will recognise, bearing in mind that the Ravens are going to play 49ers on Christmas night going into Stephen's Day, that there's an opportunity here for them to be 1 seed. Whether they'll remain 1 seed or not, bearing in mind they have to play each other then on New Year's Eve is another thing. But in this instance, I think it's going to be another similar situation to what we saw last week. I think the Cowboys are going to struggle, and I think the Dolphins are going to walk away from this game on Christmas Eve with a big victory.
Colm, you have to say that the Dolphins definitely the happier the two going into this game, and will have particularly been happy to prove that they can win without Tyreek as they did over the weekend. But was that just because it was the Jets? Are they going to face a very different prospect this weekend?
I think they will, but ultimately, Connor, the question for this is similar to one of those great Christmas songs. Can you stop the cavalry? And that is the question for Jerry's men. The good news for them is that it was Cameron Wolfe tweeted out the injury report. So not spotted at Dolphins practice today. And take note of this: the entire starting offensive line, Tyreek Hill, Xavier Howard, Raheem Mostert, Davon Achane. So, Yeah, in that case, with that level of your two running backs, your entire offensive line, two of your key defensive players, I think Jerry may have, the look may have changed for the Cowboys. And I do think that the Cowboys are susceptible to a power run game in particular. But I think I just don't know if the Dolphins are going to have the bodies. And this is an issue for them. They're obviously going to get some of those guys back and they will be good to go. But I think that they're probably, to go up against a Dallas team who will be smarting. I think that Dallas can grind out a result here and get back on track a little bit, given the Dolphins' injuries.
I think they can, Colin, and I think you've called out some really important factors to watch here. I'm not entirely sure that they will, though. Again, the Cowboys are a team I find very difficult to trust on the road because of what we've seen repeatedly. Also, I think once a weakness is exposed in the way that their run defense was exposed last week, and Greg Olsen made an interesting point in commentary. He said this Cowboys defense, playmakers though it has, it's built to stop the pass. It's not built to chase games. It's not built to be able to withstand the sort of barrage that the Bills were able to deliver at the weekend. Now, can the Dolphins do something similar with the absences that you've outlined? That's a key question for me. The other key question while we're talking injuries is Zach Martin for the Cowboys, who was a big loss. Tyler Bass filled in for him on the O-line at the weekend. It did not go particularly well. I don't know. It's a bit of a coin flip game for me. I think I'm going to go Dallas on the road. I may live to regret that, but both of these teams have soft underbellies. I'm sorry, they just we've been shown time and time again that they'll just come up small in a big spot. One of them has to come up small at the weekend, and I'm just edging towards it. Dolphins being that team and the Cowboys taking the win. Brian, the Patriots take on the Broncos at the weekend. We'll get Colum's thoughts on the Broncos in just a moment, but Broncos still very much in the mix. They still have, I think, 26% chance of making the playoffs. Okay, it's could be higher, but they're a lot better off than a lot of other teams at this time of year.
Yeah, and if they win out, I think that percentage ratio that's out there at the moment shoots up to something in the region of 65 to 70% because of the nature of so many AFC games going to come up against one another in terms of knocking each other off. So I think the Broncos have a real chance to make the playoffs. You look at what they've got ahead of them. I mean, they got the Raiders and they got the Chargers. Like, you couldn't have asked. Like, if you say to a Broncos fan at the start of the season, you hit this stage of the season with the 4 games remaining, and I suppose the situation for all those teams individually, I think they have it all to play for. And in this game, I mean, if the Broncos don't win this game, we've had difficult Broncos loss over the years where fans have lost their mind. I think if they would lose this game on Sunday Night Football against the Patriots team, you're talking about a team being on the beach. Well, it looks like a lot of those players are on the beach as well. And this surely has to be a Broncos victory. Interesting note from the Mike Carlson podcast, and I don't want to take away too much because I want people to obviously go and enjoy it because he's such an eventful character to have on the show. But he's not convinced Belichick is walking. And what I would say is Colin laughed and smirked out when I brought it up last night, but like, he's convinced it's more 50-50 than anything, and he doesn't buy into the Tom Curran article that this is a foregone conclusion. And it'd be Belichick has to find a way to navigate victories at the end of the season, to put the conversation into even more difficult and contrary conversations with the owner. But for me, not in this instance, bearing in mind the quarterback situation they have, I think the Broncos defense will feast on Zappe, and it's not Zappe and it's Jones, whoever. It'll be a difficult night for them. So, yes, Broncos all day long.
Yeah, I'm going Broncos here as well. Colin, there was a time when the thought of the Patriots visiting in the early hours of Christmas morning probably would have ruined your enjoyment of the big day. They're not the same beast now, though.
No, they certainly are not. And for me on this one, Connor, I'm going to go with the Darkness song had the Christmas time, Don't Let the Bells End. Well, I'm hoping that the Broncos playoff hopes won't end. I think it is Bill Belichick's last season in New England. I think the writing is on the wall there. I think you've seen stories. Florio, I think, had today that the the Robert Kraft and the Patriots may have been trying to induce a bidding war. I just think it sounds like they are ready to move on. And I think what Bill Belichick is attempting to do currently is to show, how good he is as a defensive coach, and to say, look, if somebody takes me on next year, if I had a better quarterback situation, we could be a very good team. So I do think he is going to make life difficult, certainly. But I have enough faith in Sean Payton to get things right. I think that the Broncos do need to change the way in which they are approaching the run game, because Javonte Williams he's struggling. He's a tough runner, but ultimately, he is at 2.8 yards carry that he's averaging currently. That's just not good enough. The Broncos have to get more explosion in the run game. The Broncos, I think Shane is saying there that the Broncos by 10. The Broncos have won very few games by more than one score. I would like that to be the case, given that I will be up in the morning. It would be nice to be watching that in the middle of the night and for it to be less stress inducing. But I would not be at all surprised if this one went down to the fourth quarter. But I do think Russell Wilson is experienced enough to deal with what Belichick is going to throw at him. And so for that reason, I am going to say that the Broncos will have enough, and probably keep an eye out for another Courtland Sutton special where he gets another crazy touchdown catch to add to his collection.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a decoration on the Christmas tree? Certainly come up with some pretty memorable ones so far this season. The Christmas evening game, Brian, sees the Raiders visit Kansas City. That couple of weeks ago looked like it might be quite disappointing. Raiders coming off that huge 63-point demolition job on the Chargers at Allegiant Stadium over the weekend, though, and might be going in here with the thought of an upset on their hands. Chiefs got back to winning ways, but hasn't all been going their way in any way, shape, or form in the last few weeks. So this could be more exciting than perhaps we would have thought before.
Depends which Raiders offense we see. Connor, is it the one we're going to see a fortnight ago that lost the game 3-0, couldn't move the ball for the entirety of a game, or the one which came out last week and scored 4 touchdowns consecutively, and Devontae Adams has a plus 100 game, and O'Connell shows a number of touchdowns. Defense gets in on the act with two pick sixes. What I would say though is, yes, we're talking about a Chiefs team that are struggling, but defensively they've still had a good season. Over the course of the season, Spagnuolo's put schemes together, and what I would say, the Raiders have always kind of gone in there and played tough. Even last year, there was a game went to overtime, and I recall the Raiders went for 2-point conversion instead of just taking the point and putting the game into overtime, which killed it off, and they won there a couple of years ago. So they always find ways to go in despite their form and put it up to the Chiefs. But Mahomes is 30-4, 4 losses in the AFC West for a reason. They beat up on these teams in the AFC West predominantly over the course of the season. I don't think it'd be a pretty game, but I think Chiefs, Colin called it out, excuse me, a few weeks ago. The Chiefs are fortunate that they're falling into a nice soft schedule towards the end of the season, and this is one for me that we'll see them win this game, but I don't think it'll be convincing.
Yeah, I think to your point, Brian, form is temporary, class is permanent. There is really a gulf between these two teams, and I wouldn't be fooled by what happened in Allegiant Stadium. Ultimately, you may say that they've averaged over 30 points the last 2 games, but they showed us something pretty putrid in the week before. They fell into a nice fixture against the Chargers. I think it's Kansas City. What do you think, Colin?
I would say, we hear this song, Bobby Helms' Jingle Bell Rock, a lot at this time of year. For the Chiefs, it's Jingle Bell Drop. My goodness, Patrick Mahomes is in hell. The sideline cuts the other night, losing his mind at his wide receivers, which is fascinating to see, because he's
just laughing here, Colin, because I hope that the guy in that viral clip where he's on the roller skates and he slips and dumps the crate of beer all over the car. I hope he gets some royalties for that clip, because the Chiefs have caused that to explode on X and Instagram every week for the whole of the season. It's just been crazy.
I definitely think we had Brit Chief on the show a couple of times previously, and he kind of got some. I think he nicknamed their speedsters way back when. But yeah, I think Jingle Bell Drop might be a good name for their collection of wide receivers currently. Despite that, I actually don't. I think this will be very close. I really do. I think I heard Tashan Reed on with Zach Kiefer earlier this week. He is the beat writer for The Athletic who covers the Raiders, and he was just talking about how the players, like very often, okay, you see that kind of bounce once somebody moves on, and particularly somebody who was as disliked as Josh McDaniels. But this is a bounce that has continued on, right? The players are really enjoying it, and he is coaching to get a real shot at the head coaching position. Now, whether he gets that from Mark Davis, I don't know, and whether you'd want it from Mark Davis, who by all accounts kind of tends to have a back channel to get information and likes to not go around the GM and the head coach to hear directly from the players. That was quite interesting to hear about that. But the players are playing, and the Chiefs are, they are struggling, and the Raiders aren't in they're in better form than the Patriots, and the Chiefs struggled. Okay, they possibly could have scored more, but I think this will be a real kind of drawn out kind of bar fight type. But I think that the Chiefs will get dragged down into it, but I do think their defense is probably good enough to get them there. But I really don't see them putting up a huge number of points on this Raiders defense.
Brian, Giants at Eagles is a 9:30 game on Christmas Day. Most of us, of course, will be breaking out the sandwiches by that point. We'll have a nice turkey and ham sambo ready to roll for that one. You, of course, will be dining on cutlets, as is the only food that can be consumed by Giants fans at the moment, under pain of death. Or maybe pizza, but I'm not sure how fond of pizza Tommy is after the imbroglio with the New Jersey pizzeria, where he was charging them 20 grand. The guy's gone to his head between himself and the agent.
He did it for free in the end.
Goodwill.
Yeah, and he's now resigned that agent from doing any of his marketing opportunities. He's brought in a more assured agent. So he's now got two agents, one that will deal with the commercial side of his football career and one that will look after the marketing side. But obviously, I spoke to Colin last night. I said, there's only one people that made that decision for him to do that for free, and that was the New York Giants themselves, and said, you get your arse down there and you manage that situation. In terms of you're talking about get your arse down there, but unfortunately his arse has been on the ground for quite a lot of his career with the Giants. He's been sacked 35 times, and in fact it's the 5th highest sack rate in the league. Now, bearing in mind he's only played
Giants, there's something in MetLife, because the Giants and Jets have given up so many sacks compared to the other teams in the league. They're number 1 and number 2 most porous O-lines, by a distance. It's not even close. I think it's Giants and Jets.
MetLife, it's to do with that offensive line, Connor. It's on solid because it doesn't matter whether they're on the road or whether they're at home. The offensive line struggles against better teams. We saw it last weekend. He was sacked 7 times. In fairness, from last weekend, people will say, "Oh, the dream is over." He didn't do a lot wrong last weekend. He did have some nice plays. He had some big plays down the field to water, and there was a lot of drop balls by players that really should have caught the ball. And defensively, I know we touched on it off recording. They were 7-6 at halftime, and they lost their kicker, and they have their punter kicking field goals. Jamie Gillan, the third Scottish kicker now third Scottish player to score a field goal for the Giants after Lawrence Tynes and Graham Gano. But they were in that game, and the defense in the second half really struggled. So it was more on them last weekend than it was the offense. This is if they were to turn the Eagles over, despite the Eagles' form, for me it would be the biggest shock of the season. I think this is right up the street for the Eagles to rebound off the three-game slide. It'd be too much for the Giants to keep up with them. I think it'd be interesting how Hurts is after the injury and after obviously the fluke symptoms and the week he's had. But no, it's Eagles all day for me.
Colin, I'm not sure whether this is the best time to be playing the Eagles or the worst time to be playing the Eagles. You feel like this skid has to turn around because they've too much talent for it not to do so. Jalen Hurts, to be fair, was sick going into last weekend. It seemed like he was pretty sick, to be fair, and that no doubt affected his performance and probably impacted on some of the poor decisions that we talked about earlier when we touched on this game. Interesting to see that the Eagles have drafted in Matt Patricia to call the defense now. They had a late coaching addition last year with the beloved Vic Fangio rolling into town to be their defensive consultant heading towards the Super Bowl, and that didn't work out so well, and nor did Matt Patricia's first game in charge last weekend.
No, it didn't. But to me, Connor, like when you watch back the game, the offense were much more of an issue to me in terms of what they did. Like Brian touched on it earlier, they got away from the run game, but like the decision to, like Seattle, you can get at Seattle underneath, you can get at Seattle in the middle of the field, and yet they kept throwing goal balls. And I saw comments from Sirianni today where he said that on the interception to AJ Brown, they were trying to draw defensive pass interference. Like, what kind of strategy is that? That's one of the more stupid things. And I'm a fan of Sirianni and the Eagles, but that might be one of the more insane and stupid things I have heard. You're trying to get a defensive pass interference. We're not trying to score, guys. We're not trying to move the ball. We're going to hope for the best that we might be able to draw defensive pass interference. Like, great if you get it. Sometimes you launch a ball up there, when a quarterback is under pressure and you hope you draw it. But your strategy when you're coming up with the play, when you're putting the ball in harm's way, is to do that. I think that's crazy. And that, Connor, to me, is a testament that things are not right there. And yeah, Jalen Hurts was sick last week, but his comments afterwards that, like, around commitment, and then you had Devontae Smith in the locker room. Things are clearly not right there. And you also had the fact that they traded for the Titans, the safety, and apparently they would then went when Desai was still defensive coordinator, and they said to Desai, "Oh no, you don't need to do anything this week. We'll take care of it as players." Now, yeah, you want your players to have leadership and that, but you don't have them cut out the defensive coordinator. Again, I don't know what is going on there, but to me, that speaks to things not being right in the building. And it was interesting because one of the best defensive plays I've ever seen was during the Super Bowl when the Patriots came back famously against the Falcons. But the Falcons were rolling down the field, and Hightower calls a timeout to kill their momentum. Right. And that's Bill Belichick was in his pomp, and he trusted his players enough to do that. And Chris Long was on with Kevin Clark this week, and he talked about Hightower being the greatest defensive leader and one of the best football leaders he'd ever come across. This guy who had all of this experience around him, all of these guys who'd won Super Bowl, and he was prepared to call players out. And to me, that's the type of leadership you want, not leadership of players who go, no, we don't need coaching. I think things are very wrong in the building there, and I worry about the Eagles. I think they, given where the Giants are and the injuries they have, and the fact that it's a great story with Tommy DeVito, but I don't. If the Eagles were going up against a better team, I think this could be 4 losses in a row. I think they're fortunate that they are going against the Giants team, who just are lacking a little bit in talent for me. But in terms of, is it a good time or a bad time to play the Eagles? It's the best possible time. I give the Giants a puncher's chance here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do think they have that chance. Playing at the Link and with hopefully a Jalen Hurts from an Eagles point of view, I think that's still a steep hill to climb. I got many things wrong when we were previewing the season ahead way back when, but I remember one of the things we were talking about with relation to the Eagles was that they had a much tougher schedule this season than they had last season, and they wouldn't have it all their own way, and we'd kind of see whether they were the team that was worthy of all the garlands that were thrown at them last season. Things opened up for them in a very real way last year. They didn't really face an awful lot of adversity. They were healthier than most teams. The NFC Championship game we've talked about ad nauseum, the Brock Purdy injury, and that laid a path to the Super Bowl that was a lot easier than a lot of other teams have faced. I wasn't necessarily sure whether we'd see them back there again, and I've seen nothing to disprove that, particularly as they run this gauntlet over the past couple of weeks. We were praising what a good team they were, pulling out results when they weren't necessarily playing at their best. And, with the glass half full approach, you were thinking, yeah, they'll get this right. They've got too much talent in the building not to, with that caveat in the background that with the departures of Steichen and Gannon, that was a lot of brains in the building, or a lot of institutional knowledge to have left in a short space of time, and it would be difficult to compensate for that. But you would see at some point that they'd pick up the play calling when they needed to. But I think you're right, Colin. There was something very wrong in that building. That there's a lot of things not going well. I think this sequence of results has really tested them. I thought they were, probably had their heart ripped out by the 49ers with the manner of that defeat. It wasn't just losing, it was the way the 49ers went to town on them in their own building. They're now not, there's no way they're getting the number 1 seed. They may not even end up winning the division if they drop this one, depending on results elsewhere and what the Cowboys do in Miami, and we'll see how that one pans out. But they have to have this one. There's no two ways about it. Like, a loss to the Giants would be absolutely disastrous, and you'd wonder, would they go into a tailspin after that? And I do think the Giants have a chance. I don't think they're necessarily going to catch that one in, though. I think it's Philly for me as well. Right, finally, great one to finish off, which is Ravens at Niners. Brian, nobody would be shocked if this ended up being the Super Bowl.
No, it's hard to see past both sides right now, bearing in mind how well they're playing. And the Ravens, they won 4 in a row. We saw Lamar put up 258 yards of total offense last weekend. He's certainly playing at an MVP level. And I saw Harbaugh's press conference during the week, and he said, I've never been more convinced he's the best quarterback in the league. And he's justified every reason as to why we paid him at the start of the season. And he has this team rolling, but sometimes you can be rolling and as much as you like when you come up against a bigger juggernaut, and right now it feels like the 49ers are that juggernaut. And Christian McCaffrey's going for an average of 116 yards a game. He's not only scoring rushing touchdowns, we saw last weekend he had 2 receiving touchdowns. Now it looks like it's a slam dunk that Brock Purdy is going to be the MVP. And I think what we've seen over the course of the last month with the 49ers is they're not taking teams lightly. They're going in and they're putting beatdowns on teams. We did speak just prior to you coming on, Jared, about was there a concern on the fact that the Cardinals put up 28 points on them. But right now, the 49ers are averaging 30-odd points a game. They put up another 40 burger last week. They're at home. It's got the makings of a great game. And I think it could be one of those that goes back and forth. But ultimately, I think right now where the 49ers are at, I think they're just a little bit ahead of where the Ravens are at. And this is why I think ultimately the 49ers will be in the Super Bowl. I'm still not convinced it'll be the Ravens that are in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Really excited to see this one, because it is the acid test for the Niners at this point. Everyone's fit, they're rolling. When they went on that 3-game losing streak, you could point to the absence of Trent Williams, to the injury to Christian McCaffrey, and to other injuries they were dealing with at the time. Debo was out as well, of course, as having hobbled them. When they have everyone fit and firing and they're going on all cylinders, they're very, very difficult to see past. I think the Ravens are a really resilient team. Looking back on it now again, Brian and Colin, I'm delighted that we got to see Lamar in the flesh in London earlier this season, because we were seeing something quite special come together then. And we talked about, the way Todd Monken was coaching that offense. We talked about the difference, the confidence that Lamar seemed to have in the weapons at his disposal. And Colin, you've often talked about finally they put, an array in front of him that enables you to get the most out of his talents without it all being on him all the time. And it's his restraint, I think, and his maturity that's really showed through in spades. They're a mean defensive outfit as well. They always have been, always will be, particularly that linebacker core. They got the best linebackers in the league for me. Sad laments to have seen Roquan Smith leave Hallis Hall and go to Baltimore, but he's proven alongside Patrick Queen to be one of the best linebackers in the NFL, and they're a fearsome operation. They are injury depleted though, and they've had to plug a lot of gaps there, and I think that is starting to show its strain on them. Lost Keaton Mitchell to a season-ending injury, a dreadful hyperextended knee. For anyone who's seen that clip, did not need that after seeing J.K. Dobbins go down. They've got Gus Edwards, they've got Justice Hill. They're not the worst backups to fall to be fair. Mark Andrews is a big loss, and they haven't necessarily felt that because Isaiah Likely has stepped up, but these are a lot of big time injuries that you don't need to be dealing with at this time of the season. You certainly don't need them when you're going to Santa Clara to play the Niners. It's San Francisco for me. I certainly don't think they're putting a beat down on Baltimore, and I'm very interested to see how they measure up against this Ravens team. I don't think the Ravens have quite enough to pull it out. Colin, will you give the last word to you?
In terms of the the injuries piece, Connor, it's possibly even worse than that, because both Zay Flowers and Odell were not at practice today. Now, injury report doesn't come out until tomorrow, so we will have to see, the extent of that. But you can only take so many injuries, and I go back to it time and time again. When healthy, this 49ers team have the best starters in the league. I don't think there is a single question about that. And whilst I don't believe that Brock Purdy should be the MVP, he is a very good QB, and they have the MVP. It might not be Brock Purdy, but it should be one of the 49ers players. And while Bing Crosby sang about little drummer boy, it is the little runner boy. Run CMC. He is absolutely sensational. He is the key component to that 49ers offense for me, and he is playing the best football of his career. He can do everything, and teams have no way of dealing with him. It will be fascinating to see this, how this Ravens team does, because they have been really good on defense. But I just think that the offensive injuries mean that they won't have the horses to live with the Niners. I can't see it, unfortunately, which is a shame, because I do think at full health, this could be a really, really great matchup. But they're not there currently. And at home, it should be the Niners. They're an offensive juggernaut. They're incredible to watch. Every single play, they almost do something different. So to me, yeah, I'm gonna go with the Niners. And but there are a lot of good Christmas games to look forward to coming up this week.
No, it really is a feast, and that's a great one to build up to. I think we're very fortunate this year with the way the schedule has fallen. The algorithm has done its job. That's our Week 16 previews in the books. Don't forget that Thursday night football preview podcast dropping tomorrow morning. Brian and Mike Carlson, lots of interesting content coming at you. So check that out wherever you get your podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We really do appreciate it. Also, of course, serves the very helpful function of helping others to find us and building the Irish NFL show community.